Hi everyone, I'm Casey and I wanted to make this video about my experience in the stock market and how I made over $50,000 since I began in 2016. So the reason why I wanted to make this video was a few fold. So first and foremost, I really wanted to talk about my investing philosophies that have worked for me and in my opinion can work for anyone else watching this video. Now, I don't plan on this channel being an instructional channel in the way of buy what I say, sell what I sell, things of that nature, but I do want to share the things that I've learned, and if I believe they're worthwhile and worth sharing, I absolutely want to share them so you can formulate an opinion for yourself if you think they would work for you. So I'm going to talk about the investment philosophies. I'm going to talk about the stocks I had success with, my experience with margin trading, which I don't recommend, even though it worked out well for me, and my view on the market going forward. And if I have time, I might go over my portfolio briefly, but I might also save that for another video. So I'm going to try to make this really long story brief, and stay tuned. So as I mentioned, I started investing in 2016, right around the election of Trump and Hillary Clinton. So I started investing right after the election, because if you're going to invest around an election, and I probably will make a video about investing around this upcoming election as well, is, in my opinion, you should not be gambling and making a bet on who's going to win. Especially in the last election, if you did that, you might have bet wrong because all the polls were saying Hillary was going to win and she didn't. So my opinion was to be reactionary and based on whoever won, try to invest in some companies who are going to benefit for at least the next 4 years during that presidency. So I made quite a bit of money for me at the time in US Steel. I had saved up quite a bit of money from working in high school, about like $5,000 or so, and I invested a lot of that into US Steel. US Steel itself, that ticker X, and then also AKS or AK Steel, which has since been acquired by a different company. I believe it's like CLF or something like that as their ticker. But I made about close to $500 in total. I believe I made $300 from US Steel and like $184 from AK Steel. I could have got them mixed up. It could be vice versa. But the point being, I made pretty good returns, like about 12% or so on the 300 and like 5% or so on the 184 in a matter of a couple weeks. And for me, with my first investing experience, and anybody who's invested themselves and made a substantial amount of money, or money that they deem substantial, it was kind of a light bulb of like, all I had to do was use my brain power, do some critical thinking, do some due diligence on which companies I believed in, and I didn't have to do manual labor. I didn't have to sit at a desk or work out in a field to make that money. I just used my brain power, and I ended up being successful in that. So that really turned me on to investing. Pretty short story I wanted to mention, especially with the upcoming election. So getting into my investment philosophy and how I use that going forward, because I really made all of my money from two main stocks, which were Facebook and Amazon. My investment philosophy, there are two main pieces of criteria. First and foremost, is this company going to be around for 5 to 10 years, better yet 20 years? If that's checked off, that's number one. Number two, during that time period, are they going to grow and be successful? And what's also very important is at what rate. So a quick but good example of one that fulfills half of this, but the other half may not be as convincing, is a company like Disney. Disney is absolutely going to be around in the next 5 to 10 years. Their parks aren't going anywhere. All of their movies and their TV shows aren't going anywhere. ESPN isn't going anywhere. But on to the second criteria, are they really going to grow that much? What if Netflix and some of the other streaming platforms start streaming sports, and so ESPN kind of takes a hit? What if they also strike a partnership with some of the creators for like the Nickelodeon style shows? Netflix has a kids section and things like that. There's not as clear of a path that they're going to absolutely grow at a faster rate. They're definitely going to grow. They're going to keep coming out with things, and they're definitely a safe bet. But that was an example I wanted to mention. So since I had that small success, I wanted to do investing. I didn't want to do trading, which is what I would constitute my little experience with the US steel industry. So I wanted to find a company that fulfilled both of those criteria. And the one that I found first was Facebook. Being a 20-year-old or so at the time, I'm 24 now, I was thinking everyone's using Facebook, but most importantly at the time was when the middle age and older generations were really starting to get into Facebook. It's after a couple years of Instagram really taking off. I remember the statistic at the time that blew my mind and made me feel so comfortable investing all of the money I had in my savings, which was like $5,000 to $6,000 at this time, into Facebook. It was like 3 billion people or so in the world were monthly active users of a Facebook product, whether that was Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp. And it was only like 30 to 40, I think it was like 50 or 60% of the world had access to internet. So I forget the exact statistics. You can go look it up, and I'm sure it's definitely changed by now. But basically, a huge proportion of the people that had access to internet were a Facebook user, and there was still a huge market of untapped potential. Now, I held Facebook for about 2 years, and halfway through that, I started using some margin. And I'll talk about margin before I talk about my Amazon story. But it's something I don't recommend at all. It worked out well for me. I had tremendous success with it both times. But I was buying and selling Facebook, and I'll be scrolling through as I talk about this with my trade confirmations and the Excel that I made to calculate all of my profits and things of that nature. But I had bought in pretty low, I believe around like somewhere in the 120 to 140 range. And when I ultimately sold, my total position was in July of 2019. So as I mentioned, July of 2018. So as I mentioned, I started in December of 2016 and exited in the summer of 2018. And this was when, right before and like right when the data privacy scandal was starting to come out, and there was the potential for Facebook to go in front of Congress and Zuckerberg testify, which did, as we know, end up happening. I sold all of my shares at $200. It was like $199 or something. And subsequently, one of the trades I'm really, really proud of exiting at that time, because they dropped all the way down to like the 140 and 160s again. And I ended up doing like a couple more trades, like probably only made like $10 or so on those, because I bought back in around like 160, sold shortly after, and same thing around 180 and sold shortly after. And Facebook, if you're familiar with what their price is right now, it's in the 240s. And so even if I never ever sold it, I would have still gained substantially, a good amount. Nowhere near as much as I would have made with Amazon. But the reason why I switched to Amazon, and I'll get into that, was because my philosophies changed. So I definitely think you should always be investing for a year or two or longer in a company. You should absolutely be strict in believing in the company that much enough to do it and then sticking to your plan. But the whole thing about the data privacy really, really shook how strong I felt about Facebook fitting that criteria. And I won't get too into it, but basically, I wasn't sure, is a competitor like Twitter or Snapchat had went public pretty recently, are they going to come and say they have way better privacy and data policies, blah blah blah. So that's why I exited, and I shifted to Amazon. And where I ended up putting more money into the market from Amazon came from my small business, Wine Country Woodworks. I have a channel associated with that as well. I'll put it in the description if anyone's curious. But I basically had a manufacturing business, and I ordered all of my things from Amazon and just e-commerce in general from other websites. And I was thinking, I can't be the only person doing this and realizing how easy and how great it is, and how, if I don't need to go get something right away from Home Depot and drive 30 minutes or so, hour round trip, and I can just get it in a couple of days and order it from Amazon, I'm going to order it from Amazon. And so Amazon fit the criteria way, way more, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. But first I wanted to just talk about my experience with margin, because I definitely don't want to misconceive anybody about how or why my gains were so big. So if you're not familiar with margin trading, it's essentially borrowing from your brokerage. You're not borrowing from a bank, but you could think of it as taking a loan from a bank and then trading with that money. So it's super sketchy. I absolutely don't recommend it. It worked out well for me, but in traditional investing, you can never lose more money than the amount of money you put in. You buy one share of a company that's worth $100 a share, and even if they went bankrupt, it could go down to zero. It can't go to negative 100 and you lose 200 when you only put in 100, right? That can only happen if you trade on margin. You own the gains from margin, but most importantly, the reason why I don't recommend it is you own the losses. So it worked out for me because the only positive thing I can say about margin is that it really, really made me reinforce my two philosophy criteria of, are they going to be around for 5 to 10 years or longer, and are they going to grow a lot during that time? Because if I wasn't trading on margin, I might not have worried so much about that scandal with Facebook and exited when I did. But the reason why I felt so comfortable having $6,000 to $10,000 of margin on Facebook, and basically the amount of money I had invested in Facebook, I doubled that with margin, was because I felt so comfortable with those philosophy criteria being fulfilled. And with Amazon, while I'm on the topic of margin, I started out with like $15,000 worth of margin, double the money. Once I got more market value of Amazon, I ended up upgrading that to $30,000 of margin, which is a lot of money to be borrowing from a brokerage. And Robinhood has one of the lowest margin rates. It was 5% interest annually, and so I really took advantage of that, and it really, really worked out well for me. I bought 18 shares of Amazon with that $30,000 of margin at $18.55 was the share price. A couple weeks ago, I sold 12 shares of Amazon at $2,700 to cover the margin cost of $30,000, and I ended up getting like $32,000 or so back. So I got 6 shares of Amazon equity that I got to keep, and $2,000 or $3,000 cash. And a lot of that money I ended up putting just back into savings. Some of it I reinvested. I've since sold some Amazon, more Amazon. Since then, I sold some more in the $2,700 that were my shares. I sold some more at like $30.50. I think I sold another 8 or so, and reinvested some of that money, and also just saved some of that money in case the market has another substantial dip soon. But I wanted to touch on margin because, as I mentioned, it's super risky, super scary, and I don't recommend it, but I did want to be 100% transparent about my experience with it, because people might be thinking, wait, this guy invested $5,000 to $6,000 and then made that much money in Facebook, and then invested like $15,000 to $30,000 in Amazon and made that much money in Amazon. So ultimately, at this point in time, counting the 12 shares of Amazon that I still own, I'm up $57,000 in the stock market. I made about $16,000 and some change with Facebook, and as of right now, I've made about $41,000 and some change in Amazon. Now, my main success, I know I've mentioned it a lot in this video, and it's the reason why I'm making it, is because the two main philosophy criteria that I talked about are really, really important. And the reason why I also want to make this video and kind of end it with talking about my market outlook is it's something that really, really needs to be addressed right now. Because, with a systematic risk type event like COVID-19 was, that really affected everything in the market, it wasn't a single company's fault or something that diversification would have helped. It was actually the opposite, where me being undiversified, having everything in Amazon, really helped. And I would say right now, with COVID-19 and the way it's changed the work world and the economy, I think it's really, really important to reevaluate any stock that you are currently invested in or looking to invest, and thinking, what's this new world going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years? Is this stock going to be a part of that? And if they are, how much are they going to grow? So, going back to my Disney example, just really quick, I'll mention, right, they're still going to be around in 5 to 10 years, but Do we know for sure if parks are going to get the same amount of visitors? In my opinion, probably. I think, kids really aren't as at risk as we think, and I think the parks and stuff will go back. But are people going to be going back to movie theaters as much? I don't know either, right? These things, even though they may get shrugged off in a year or so, they still bring up these questions. And the one benefit that I got from Margin is knowing that I had to be 100% confident in both of those criteria being fulfilled. So I don't really have too much more that I wanted to talk about in this video. I think I am going to go over my portfolio, what I'm currently invested in right now. But before I make that video, I'll just quickly mention I've got some shares in Amazon, obviously, as I mentioned, but in Microsoft, Activision Blizzard. What else? I have some in AT&T at kind of a dividend play to be safe. I have a very small amount in some airline stocks for when those finally do rebound. I've got a small percentage, a little more than the airlines, but a smaller percentage in U.S. banks because they haven't recovered at all, but in my opinion will, at least halfway, since they're down like 50 to 60% in certain cases. So I'll save that video for the future. If I left anything out, I mean, it was a long story to tell and a little bit of a long video, but definitely comment down below if you have any questions and concerns, and absolutely suggestions too for future videos, or ways I can edit my video better, or anything of that nature. I absolutely wanted to mention that the reason why I made this video had no intention at all of like flaunting or bragging about my success. It really had to do with talking about the two philosophy criteria that I strongly believe in investing, and talking about my experience in general, because I wanted to make this video a little sooner in the life of my channel than later, just so that even though I'm not going to be giving instructions on like buy this, sell that, I wanted people to understand that I have had years of experience in the market, even though I'm young, and also have had success with that experience and learned a lot from it. So those were the main reasons why I wanted to make this video. And thank you so much if you got to the end. I really, really appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. It helps me out a ton, as well as liking the video if you liked it. And again, I'll reiterate the comment thing. Love to see comments. So please let me know if there's anything else I can do better, anything I didn't do too well on, suggestions, whatever. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.